I should have known the champagne toast would be poisoned with contempt. After all, nothing in the Moretti household ever came without a price, and tonight, at my mother's 60th birthday celebration, I was about to pay in full. The crystal chandeliers cast their expensive glow over the dining room, illuminating faces I'd known my entire life but had never truly seen clearly until that moment. My father, Giovanni Moretti, stood at the head of the table in his custom Italian suit, raising his glass with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent decades commanding rooms. My brother Marco shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his lawyer's instinct already sensing the approaching storm. Isabella, my older sister, smiled that thin smile she'd perfected in medical school, the one that said she was above whatever drama was about to unfold. To my beautiful wife, my father began, his voice carrying that particular blend of warmth and authority that had built his commercial real estate empire. And to family, the foundation of everything we are. I should have left it at that. I should have smiled, nodded, and swallowed my dignity along with the expensive wine. God knows I'd done it 1,000 times before. Of course, he continued, and I felt my spine stiffen. Not all of us contribute equally to that foundation. Some of us prefer to play on our laptops in pajamas rather than engage in real work. The table went still. It wasn't the first time he'd taken a shot at my career, my choice to leave the family business to build my own digital marketing consultancy. But something in his tone tonight, something in the way he looked at me with a mixture of disdain and something darker, perhaps fear, finally snapped the cord I'd been holding onto for 33 years. Real work, I heard myself say, my voice cutting through the awkward silence like a blade through silk. You mean the kind where you spend 3-hour lunches talking about deals that may or may not happen, while I'm actually generating measurable results for clients who appreciate competence over connections? My mother's hand flew to her throat. Marco's eyes went wide. But I wasn't finished. Or perhaps you're still bitter that I walked away from being your glorified assistant, fetching coffee and pretending your outdated strategies were genius, just so you could tell yourself you were mentoring me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that felt like finality. This laptop and these pajamas have built something real, Dad. Something that doesn't require me to compromise my integrity, or pretend that belittling your daughter at every family gathering is somehow a sign of love. I looked around the table at their frozen faces, at my mother's tears already forming, at Isabella's scandalized expression, at Marco's conflicted frown. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. If this is the kind of family you want, I said, picking up my purse, then I don't belong in it. I never did. I didn't just leave. I picked up the linen napkin from my lap, threw it onto my plate with enough force to make the silverware clatter, and walked out with my head high, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to freedom. The assault began before I'd even made it home. My phone started buzzing in the cup holder of my car, the screen lighting up like a slot machine hitting jackpot, except every win was another attempt to drag me back into their orbit. Marco called first, his voice careful, measured, the way he spoke to difficult clients. Val, come on. You know how Dad is. He didn't mean it. Then why did he say it, Marco? I asked, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. And more importantly, which side are you on? The truth, or the convenient lie we've all been living? He hesitated, and in that pause, I had my answer. I hung up. Isabella was next, and she didn't bother with gentle. You've ruined everything. Mom's in tears, Dad's furious, and all because you can't take a joke. Do you have any idea how selfish you're being? The party was already ruined, Isabella. It's been ruined for years. You just didn't notice because you were too busy being the perfect daughter, collecting gold stars for compliance. My voice was ice. Congratulations on your trophy. I hope it keeps you warm. Then came my mother, and this was the hardest. Her voice was thick with tears, wielding guilt like a weapon she didn't even realize she was holding. Please, Val, he's your father. You're tearing this family apart. Mom, I said softly, pulling into my driveway. You've been standing on the sidelines for too long. You watched him diminish me, year after year, and you said nothing. You chose neutrality, which means you chose him. Now I'm choosing me. But family is everything, she sobbed. No, Mom. Family should be everything. There's a difference. I ended the call and sat in my car for a long moment, staring at my house, my sanctuary, the place I'd bought with my own money, furnished with my own taste, built with my own dreams. And then, with trembling fingers, I did something I'd never imagined I'd have the strength to do. I blocked my father's number, then my mother's, then Isabella's. The silence that followed was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I thought I'd have at least a day to process, to breathe, to figure out my next move. I was wrong. The next morning, I was in my home office, trying to focus on a client presentation, when I heard the commotion downstairs. Voices, loud voices, and then footsteps, heavy and purposeful, climbing my stairs. My father appeared in my doorway like an avenging angel of patriarchy, with Marco trying to hold him back and Isabella right behind, her face set in lines of righteous judgment. "This childish tantrum ends now," Giovanni announced, walking into my office as if he owned it, as if the mortgage in my name meant nothing, as if boundaries were concepts that didn't apply to him. "You will apologize to your mother, you will attend your brother's partnership celebration next week, and you will stop this embarrassing display." Something cold and clear settled in my chest. I stood up slowly, closed my laptop, and walked around my desk until I was standing directly in front of him. I was 5'6" to his 6'2", but in that moment, I felt taller. "This is my house," I said quietly. "You don't have the right to walk in here and give me orders. You never did. I'm your father. You're a bully." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "And you're trespassing. Get out. Now." His face went purple. For a terrible second, I thought he might actually hit me. I saw his hand twitch, saw Marco step forward, ready to intervene. But I didn't flinch. I stared him down with every ounce of strength I'd been storing up for this moment. "You ungrateful." "Out." I pointed to the door, my hand steady. "Or I call the police and explain how the great Giovanni Moretti broke into his daughter's home because she dared to have self-respect." Marco grabbed his arm. "Dad, come on, let's go." Isabella was staring at me like I'd grown a second head, but there was something else in her eyes too. Something that might have been a flicker of doubt. I watched them leave, heard the front door slam, and then stood there in my office, shaking so hard I had to sit down. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of relief, of rage, of grief for the family I'd wanted and never had. When I finally stood up and looked at myself in the mirror across the room, I saw someone different. Someone who'd just fought the first real battle of her life and won. The war, however, was just beginning. Within a week, I started noticing the casualties. A promising client suddenly went cold, citing internal changes that required them to explore other options. Another meeting was mysteriously canceled last minute. My office lease renewal came up, and suddenly the landlord was considering other tenants despite our 3-year relationship. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Giovanni Moretti had decades of connections in Portland's business community, and he was using every single one to punish me for my defiance. I sat in my living room one evening, looking at the polite rejection emails, the canceled contracts, the closed doors, and felt the old fear creeping back in. The voice that whispered I'd made a terrible mistake, that I should apologize, that pride wasn't worth poverty. Then my phone rang. Lucas Thorne, my best friend since college and business partner on several projects, his voice warm and solid. "I heard something interesting today," he said. "Apparently you're persona non grata in certain circles." "You heard correctly." "Good thing I'm not in those circles." I could hear the smile in his voice. "I have 3 clients who need exactly what you do, and they don't give a damn who your father is." "Want their numbers?" I closed my eyes, feeling the tightness in my chest ease just a fraction. "Yes. That's my girl. Also, Val, he's scared of you. That's why he's doing this. He sees what you're building and knows it's better than anything he could create." After we hung up, I made a decision. If my father wanted to play hardball with his connections, I'd build my own network, one based on actual merit, not inherited power. The next morning, I reached out to every satisfied client I'd ever had, asking for referrals and testimonials. I contacted Elena Rodriguez, whose company I'd helped rescue from bankruptcy 2 years ago. I called former colleagues who'd left traditional corporate structures to build their own ventures. I found the rebels, the innovators, the people who valued talent over pedigree. And slowly, carefully, I started building something Giovanni Moretti couldn't touch because it existed entirely outside his world. Marco showed up at my door 3 weeks later, alone this time, looking exhausted. I almost didn't let him in, but something in his face made me hesitate. 5 minutes, I said. We sat in my kitchen, the afternoon light making everything feel both too intimate and too exposed. He held a coffee cup, but didn't drink. "I've been thinking," he started, then stopped. "Actually, that's a lie. I haven't been able to stop thinking. About what you said. About sides." I waited. "He's destroying you," Marco said quietly. "Dad, I've watched him make phone calls, heard him at the club. He's actively sabotaging your business, Val." And when I asked him to stop, he told me loyalty means supporting family, not enabling rebellion. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because you were right. At the birthday party, you were right about all of it." He finally met my eyes. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what he wanted, convinced myself that keeping the peace was the same as being good. But watching him try to destroy you for having the courage I never had, it's making me sick." "Marco, I can't undo what's been done," he interrupted. "But I can tell you what's coming. He's planning to pressure the business alliance to rescind your membership. He's already spoken to 3 board members." My stomach dropped. The alliance was crucial for networking, for credibility. Losing it would be a significant blow. There's more, Marco continued. Miles is getting married. The engagement party is in 2 weeks, and Dad's planning to use it as a platform to publicly rehabilitate the family image. He's going to paint you as the problem child who abandoned the family, himself as the patient father. Isabella's on board. Of course she is. But I'm not. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. These are copies of some of Dad's less ethical business dealings. Insurance documents he falsified, bribes disguised as consulting fees, some emails about the properties he sold to the city. Nothing criminal enough to prosecute, probably, but enough to damage his reputation if it became public. Consider it insurance. I stared at the folder like it was a bomb. You're giving me ammunition against your own father? I'm giving you protection, he corrected. You don't have to use it. But if he pushes you too far, if he tries to completely destroy you, you'll have leverage. I can't stand publicly with you yet. I have clients who depend on the firm, and if I break with him openly, he'll burn everything down, but I can help you from the inside. After he left, I sat with that folder for hours, feeling its weight. I'd wanted allies, but I hadn't expected them to come from inside the fortress itself. The engagement party invitation arrived via courier, thick cardstock with embossed lettering, addressed to Valentina Moretti and guest. The note inside, in my mother's handwriting, was simple. Please come, for Miles, for family, we can put this behind us. But the text message that followed from Isabella was less subtle. If you don't show up, you're proving Dad right about everything. Don't be selfish. They wanted me there as a prop, a symbol of family unity that didn't exist. They wanted me to smile in photos while they whispered behind my back, to prove that Giovanni Moretti's power was absolute, that even his rebel daughter would eventually heal. I picked up my phone and called Lucas. How would you feel about hosting a party? Always. What's the occasion? I'm launching something new, something big, and I need it to happen in exactly 2 weeks, on a Saturday evening. The same Saturday as your brother's engagement party? The exact same night. And he laughed, the sound rich with understanding and a touch of wicked delight. Tell me what you need. For the next 2 weeks, I worked like a woman possessed. I'd been toying with the idea of opening a proper studio, a physical space where I could expand beyond digital marketing into full-scale brand strategy and creative services. Now I accelerated those plans with laser focus. I found a stunning loft in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. I hired 2 talented designers I'd been mentoring. I reached out to every client, every connection, every person who'd ever benefited from my work, and invited them to the grand opening. The video call came 4 days before both events. My entire family, except Miles, arranged themselves on screen like a tribunal. My father in the center, flanked by my mother and Isabella, Marco in the background looking uncomfortable. We need to discuss your behavior, Giovanni began, his voice carrying that particular tone of forced patience that meant he was furious. This situation has gone on long enough. I agree, I said calmly. It has. If you don't attend Miles's engagement party, you're out. Completely. No more family events, no more inheritance, no more connection to the Moretti name. Is that supposed to be a threat? I asked, because it sounds like a gift. Isabella leaned forward. Stop being so dramatic, Val. Just come to the party, smile for a few photos, and we can all move on. Move on to what? To pretending the last 2 months didn't happen? To letting Dad continue to undermine my business while playing the devoted father in public? We're offering you a way back, my mother said, her voice trembling. Don't you want to be part of this family? I want to be part of a family that respects me. I replied, that's not what this is. This is a hostage negotiation where I'm supposed to be grateful for the privilege of my own captivity. My father's face darkened. Last chance, Valentina. No, Dad, this is your last chance, and you're not taking it. I looked at each of them in turn. I've found my family. A family that doesn't require me to make myself smaller to make them feel bigger. A family built on mutual respect and genuine support, not obligation and manipulation. Then you're no longer a Moretti, he said, his voice like stone. Funny, I said. I was thinking the same thing. Goodbye. I ended the call and sat back in my chair, waiting for the guilt, the panic, the second-guessing to hit me. Instead, I felt light, free. The night of the dueling parties arrived with perfect Portland weather, clear and crisp with a hint of autumn in the air. I stood in my new studio, watching the catering staff arrange appetizers and the bartender set up the bar, and felt a surge of pride that brought tears to my eyes. Lucas came up beside me, devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit. You ready for this? More than ready. The guests started arriving at 7. Elena Rodriguez came first, bringing her entire executive team. Former colleagues from my corporate days showed up with bottles of champagne and congratulations. Clients I'd helped build flew in from other cities. And then there were the surprises. Sophia Rossi walked in at 7:30, stunning in an emerald dress, and I froze. I'd sent her an invitation on a whim, knowing she was Miles's fiancée, but hoping she might see the gesture as an olive branch. I have approximately 1 hour before I'm expected at my engagement party, she said without preamble, taking a glass of champagne from a passing server. So let's make this count. Show me what you've built. I gave her the tour, explaining my vision for the studio, the services we'd offer, the gap in the market I was filling. She listened with sharp intelligence, asking questions that proved she understood business better than half my former colleagues. This is impressive, she said when we finished, and I could tell she meant it. Really impressive. The kind of thing that makes me wonder why you wasted time in your father's shadow. So do I. She studied me for a moment. Can I be honest with you? Please. I'm marrying into the Moretti family because Miles is a good man and I love him, but your father terrifies me. The way he controls everything, the way he's tried to dictate every aspect of the wedding, the way he talks about you. She took a sip of champagne. I keep thinking, will this be me in a few years? Will I be the one at family dinners, being subtly torn down while everyone pretends it's normal? It doesn't have to be, I said quietly. You can set boundaries now. Decide what you'll accept and what you won't. It's harder than it sounds, but the alternative is losing yourself piece by piece. She nodded slowly. He's furious about tonight, you know. About this party. He sees it as a direct challenge to his authority, proof that you're trying to embarrass the family. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm just living my life. I know. That's what makes him so angry. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. Good luck, Valentina. I hope this place is everything you want it to be. And if I ever need a rebrand or a strategic overhaul, you'll be my first call. After she left, presumably to face her future father-in-law's wrath, I rejoined the party. The studio was packed now, people laughing and talking, examining the portfolio displays on the walls, toasting to new beginnings. Rebecca Chen, my elderly neighbor who'd become an unexpected friend during these difficult months, found me by the windows. Your father is a fool, she said simply, in that direct way of hers that came from 8 decades of not suffering nonsense. My husband was like that, couldn't stand the idea that our daughter was smarter than him. Pushed her away for years before he finally saw reason. She patted my hand. But whether he sees reason or not, you've done something beautiful here, dear. Don't let anyone take that from you. Around 9, Marco slipped in through the side entrance, still in his suit from Miles's party. He looked around with wide eyes, taking in the crowd, the space, the obvious success of the evening. I told them I had an emergency call, he said. Isabella was asking questions, but Mom covered for me. I think she's starting to crack. What's it like over there? Tense. Dad's holding court, playing the magnanimous patriarch, but there's an edge to everything. Miles is happy, Sophia's gracious, but everyone keeps asking about you. Your absence is louder than your presence would have been. He accepted a drink from a server and raised it to me. This is amazing, Val. You did this in 2 weeks? When you're properly motivated, time becomes flexible. He saw the social media posts, people tagging you, congratulating you. I watched his face when Isabella showed him the photos on her phone. For just a second he looked scared. Good, I said, and meant it. He should be. The article appeared 3 days later in Portland Business Monthly. Valentina Moretti, breaking the mold and building an empire. The journalist, a sharp woman named Cynthia Park, had attended the opening and been impressed enough to fast-track the story. She'd interviewed my clients, gotten quotes from Elena Rodriguez about how I'd saved her company, talked to my team about my leadership style, and while she never explicitly mentioned my family situation, she'd artfully woven in references to forging her own path and stepping out of traditional expectations that made the subtext clear to anyone paying attention. The article went viral in Portland's business community. My phone exploded with calls, emails, LinkedIn messages. 2 major consulting firms reached out about potential partnerships. A venture capital fund wanted to discuss expansion opportunities. And perhaps most satisfying, 3 companies that had ghosted me after my father's interference quietly got back in touch, suddenly very interested in working together. I found out later that Giovanni read the article at his club, over his regular morning coffee with his business cronies. According to Marco, who heard it secondhand from one of the club's managers, he'd gone pale, then red, then left without finishing his breakfast. Isabella called me that afternoon, which was surprising enough that I actually answered. The article, she said without preamble. It's everywhere. I noticed. He's not handling it well. That's not my problem, Isabella. There was a long pause. No, she said finally. I suppose it's not. Val, can I ask you something? You can ask. Were you happy, before all this, when you were still coming to family dinners and playing along? Were you actually happy? The question caught me off guard. No, I said honestly. I was surviving. There's a difference. I think I'm just surviving too, she whispered. I've been thinking about what you said at Mom's party, about gold stars for compliance. And I keep wondering what I'm actually achieving with all this perfect daughter performance. Am I even myself anymore? Or am I just a collection of Dad's expectations? Isabella, I'm not ready to do what you did, she said quickly. I'm not that brave, but I wanted you to know that I'm thinking about it, about what it costs to keep the peace. And I'm starting to wonder if the price is too high. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. My goal had never been to destroy my family or to force them all to choose sides. I just wanted to breathe, to live, to be myself without apologizing for it. If that rippled outward and made others question their own choices, maybe that wasn't a bad thing. The invitation to speak at the Northwest Business Forum came 4 weeks after the article. It was one of the premier events in Portland's business calendar, attracting hundreds of entrepreneurs, executives, and investors. The theme was building success on your own terms, and apparently, I'd become the poster child for that concept. I accepted immediately. The forum was held at the Sentinel Hotel, in the grand ballroom where I'd attended more business dinners than I could count, often as my father's +1, silent and decorative. Standing at the lectern, looking out at the sea of faces, I felt the full weight of the irony. And there, in the third row, sat Giovanni Moretti. He hadn't RSVP'd, wasn't on the guest list, but here he was, his expression unreadable, his presence a challenge. I could have changed my speech, softened it, made it less personal. Instead, I decided to tell the truth. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm Valentina Moretti, and I'm here to talk to you about the most difficult decision of my professional life, choosing to succeed without the support I thought I needed." I told them about building a business from scratch, about the importance of authentic relationships over inherited connections, about learning to value your own opinion of yourself over others' opinions of you. I talked about the courage it takes to walk away from something comfortable but toxic, and the strength required to build something new from nothing. "There's a myth in business that you need certain advantages to succeed," I said, feeling my father's eyes boring into me. "The right connections, the right background, the right family name. But what I've learned is that those advantages often come with strings attached, with expectations that require you to compromise the very things that make you valuable: your vision, your integrity, your authenticity." I saw heads nodding, people leaning forward, and I saw my father's jaw tighten. The best thing that ever happened to my career was being forced to prove myself without a safety net. Because in that free fall, I discovered I could fly. I found clients who valued my work, not my last name. I built relationships based on mutual respect, not obligation. And I created something that truly belonged to me, that couldn't be taken away or used as leverage. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood. I saw tears on some faces, fierce grins on others, recognition of their own struggles reflected in my story. I stepped down from the stage and immediately found myself surrounded by people wanting to shake my hand, exchange cards, tell me their own stories of breaking away and building anew. It took me 20 minutes to navigate through the crowd, and when I finally reached the edge of the ballroom, my father was waiting. "You think you've won," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only I could hear over the ambient noise. "You think this little display of independence means something." "I don't think I've won anything, Dad," I replied, meeting his eyes. "I've just stopped playing a game that was rigged from the start." "I made you," he said. "Everything you are, every opportunity you've had, it came from being a Moretti." "No," I said, and my voice was gentle, almost pitying. "Everything I am came from surviving being your daughter. You taught me resilience by forcing me to develop it. You taught me independence by refusing to support me. You taught me my own worth by consistently undervaluing it." I paused, letting that sink in. "So, in a way, you did make me. Just not in the way you intended. You're still my daughter," he said, and for the first time, I heard something crack in his voice. "This is still a family. A family is supposed to lift you up, Dad. A family celebrates your success, not sabotages it. A family respects your boundaries, not tramples them." I took a breath. "I've built a real family now. People who choose to be in my life, who support me without conditions, who value me for who I am. You could have been part of that. But you chose control over connection, power over love." I turned to leave, and he grabbed my arm. "Don't walk away from me." "I'm not walking away from you," I said, gently removing his hand. "I'm walking toward myself. There's a difference." I left him standing there, alone in his expensive suit, with his expensive pride, and felt nothing but relief. 6 months later, my studio was thriving. We'd expanded to a second floor, hired 3 more employees, and landed 2 national clients. I'd been profiled in Forbes, given the keynote at 3 more conferences, and been approached by a publisher about writing a book on authentic business building. Marco had left our father's firm to start his own practice, specializing in representing small businesses and startups. He and I met for lunch once a week, slowly rebuilding a relationship based on who we actually were, not who we'd been forced to be. Isabella had started therapy and was taking space from family dinners, much to my mother's distress. We texted occasionally, careful conversations that felt like two strangers learning each other's language. My mother had come to visit once, sitting awkwardly in my studio while I made tea. We'd talked about safe things, the weather and her garden and Miles's wedding plans. At the door, she'd hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm proud of you. I should have said that sooner." It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't resolution, but it was something. A beginning, maybe, or an acknowledgement. As for Giovanni, I heard through Marco that he'd stepped down from his company's day-to-day operations, citing a desire to spend more time with family. The real story, Marco said, was that the board had been concerned about his increasingly erratic decisions and the reputational damage from the way he'd handled his children's defection. He was still powerful, still connected, but diminished somehow, like a lion whose roar no longer made the other animals run. I hosted a small celebration at the studio on the anniversary of that fateful birthday dinner. Just a few close friends, some key clients, the people who'd stood by me or found me on the other side. Lucas gave a toast that made me cry. Elena presented me with a plaque that read, "For the woman who taught us that falling is just another way to fly." And Rebecca brought homemade cookies. Marco showed up late, looking nervous. "I brought someone," he said. "I hope that's okay." Sophia Rossi stepped out from behind him, no longer my brother's fiancée, but his wife, and she was smiling. "I told you I'd call when I needed a rebrand," she said. "Well, I need a rebrand. My company, my image, my whole approach. And I want you to do it." We talked business for a while, her ideas spilling out in an excited rush, and I realized she was doing her own version of what I'd done. Breaking free, choosing herself, building something authentic. As the party wound down and people started to leave, I stood at the window of my studio, looking out at the Portland skyline. The city lights sparkled like possibilities, like promises, like proof that you could start over and build something beautiful from the ashes of what you'd lost. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. You've proven your point. If you ever want to talk, I'm here, Dad." I read it twice, feeling the old pull, the temptation to reach back, to bridge the gap, to give him the absolution he was seeking. Then I deleted it. Maybe someday we'd have that conversation. Maybe years from now, when I was even stronger and he was even humbler, we'd find a way to coexist in each other's lives without destroying each other. Maybe Isabella would convince me to give him another chance, or maybe Marco would facilitate some kind of family therapy session, but not today. Today, I was celebrating the life I'd built, the person I'd become, the courage it had taken to choose myself. Today was for honoring the hard-won peace that came from finally being free. I turned back to my party, to Lucas laughing with Sophia, to Marco deep in conversation with one of my designers, to Rebecca showing someone photos on her phone. My family. The one I'd chosen, the one that chose me back, the one built on respect and authenticity and love without conditions. And I smiled, raising my glass to my own reflection in the dark window, to the woman who'd survived the Moretti dynasty and built something better in its place, to freedom, to growth, to the sweet, hard-earned joy of becoming who you were always meant to be. The morning after the anniversary celebration, I woke up to an email that made my coffee taste sweeter than usual. Tech Venture Capital, one of the most prestigious investment firms in the Pacific Northwest, wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss funding my expansion plans. They'd been following my trajectory since the business forum speech and were impressed by my growth metrics. I sat at my kitchen table, reading and rereading the email, letting the magnitude of it sink in. This wasn't just about money. This was validation from people who saw hundreds of business pitches every month and chose mine. This was proof that betting on myself had been the right call. Lucas called during my second cup of coffee. "Did you see the Tech Venture email?" "I'm looking at it right now." "Val, do you know what this means? They typically only invest in companies with massive scale potential. They see something big in what you're building." "I know," I said, and heard the wonder in my own voice. "I'm trying not to panic." "Don't panic, prepare. You're going to walk into that meeting and show them exactly why they reached out. You've done harder things than impress venture capitalists." He was right. I'd survived Giovanni Moretti. I could handle anything. The meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks out, which gave me time to refine my pitch deck, update my financials, and rehearse my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. Marco, who'd handled enough corporate deals to know the landscape, offered to review my materials. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our offices, spreading documents across a corner table, while rain pattered against the windows. He went through my pitch with a lawyer's attention to detail, asking the hard questions I'd need to answer, pushing me to quantify my vision. "This is solid," he said finally, sitting back with his third espresso. "Really solid. But they're going to ask about your long-term vision. Where do you see the company in 5 years? 10? I'd been thinking about that question for months, but saying it out loud felt like making a promise to the universe. I want to build something that changes how businesses think about authentic branding. Not just a consultancy, but a movement. Training programs, speaking tours, maybe even a nonprofit arm that helps underrepresented entrepreneurs find their voice. Marco smiled, and it was genuine, proud. That sounds exactly like something you'd do. Turn a personal revolution into a public resource. Is that crazy? It's ambitious, but crazy is just another word for visionary when it works. He paused, stirring his espresso, even though it didn't need stirring. Dad asked about you yesterday. My stomach tightened. And? He wanted to know if you'd be at Miles's baby shower. Apparently, Sophia's pregnant, and Mom's planning this big family event. I processed that information slowly. Miles was going to be a father. I was going to be an aunt. Another generation of Morettis was coming into the world, and I'd have to decide what role, if any, I'd play in their life. What did you tell him? I told him to ask you himself, but he won't, because that would require acknowledging that he drove you away in the first place. Marco met my eyes. You should come, though. Not for him. For Miles. For Sophia. She asks about you sometimes. Wants to know if we've talked. I'll think about it. But I already knew my answer. I was done making myself uncomfortable to ease other people's guilt. The tech venture meeting arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that felt like possibility. I dressed in my power suit, the navy one I'd bought to celebrate my first major contract, and practiced my breathing exercises in the car. The firm's offices occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown, all modern design and carefully curated success. The receptionist led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, where 3 partners waited: Melissa Chen, David Foster, and James Rodriguez. Miss Moretti, Melissa said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, her smile professional but warm. Thank you for coming in. We've been eager to have this conversation. I launched into my pitch, and everything I'd rehearsed flowed naturally. I walked them through my business model, my growth trajectory, my vision for scaling. I showed them client testimonials, revenue projections, market analysis, and I told them the story behind the story, how I'd built this company from scratch, from necessity and determination, how that origin gave me a unique perspective on authentic business building. David leaned forward during the Q&A portion. Your numbers are impressive, but what really caught our attention was your brand positioning. You've managed to create something that feels both aspirational and accessible. How did you crack that code? By being honest, I said simply. My clients don't come to me because I have all the answers. They come because I'm willing to ask the hard questions, to challenge the comfortable lies businesses tell themselves about their brand identity. I built this company by being unapologetically myself, and I teach my clients to do the same. Melissa smiled. We did our homework on you, Valentina. We know about your family background, about the Moretti name in Portland business circles. We also know you've deliberately kept that connection out of your marketing. Why? Here was the question I'd been waiting for, the one that could make or break this meeting. Because I wanted to build something that succeeded or failed on its own merits. The Moretti name comes with expectations, with a particular way of doing business that doesn't align with my values. I needed to prove, to myself and to the market, that I could create value independent of that legacy. And now, James asked, now that you've proven it, do you regret walking away from that network? Not for a second, I said. The best decisions aren't always the easiest ones. Walking away from my family's business connections was hard. Building from zero was harder. But compromise would have been hardest of all, because I'd have been paying for it every day in pieces of myself I could never get back. The 3 partners exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then Melissa spoke again. We'd like to offer you a term sheet. $2 million in Series A funding for 20% equity. But more than the money, we want to offer you access to our network, our resources, and our experience scaling companies like yours. What you've built is impressive. What we think you could build with the right support could be transformative. I managed to maintain my composure until I got back to my car. Then I sat in the parking garage and cried, big ugly tears of relief and joy and vindication. I called Lucas first, and he screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then I called Marco. How did it go? He asked. They offered me $2 million. Silence. Then, Val. Holy shit. Val. I know. I need a lawyer to review the term sheet. Are you free? For this, I'll cancel everything. Send it over. And Val, I'm so fucking proud of you. After we hung up, I sat with the news for a moment longer, letting it become real. Then I drove to my studio, walked into the middle of the main floor where my team was working, and announced, we just got funded. Dinner's on me tonight, and tomorrow we start planning our expansion. The celebration that followed was spontaneous and perfect. My team gathered around, asking questions, offering congratulations, already spinning ideas for what we could do with this new capital. This was what I'd built, Not just a business, but a community. A place where people felt valued, where creativity was celebrated, where success was shared. That evening, I finally opened Instagram for the first time in weeks. My business account was flooded with messages, but it was my personal account that caught my attention. Isabella had posted a photo from earlier that day, a shot of the Portland skyline with the caption, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reimagine your life," inspired by someone who did it first. I stared at that post for a long time, feeling something shift in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was recognition. Isabella was on her own journey now, taking her own first steps toward authenticity, and while I couldn't walk that path for her, maybe my example had lit the way. I commented simply, "Proud of you." She responded within minutes. "Learned from the best. Coffee soon?" "Soon," I agreed. The baby shower invitation arrived a week later, printed on thick cream cardstock with Sophia's elegant handwriting. "Dear Val," it read, "I know family is complicated, but I hope you'll come celebrate this new life with us. No pressure, no expectations. Just an open door if you choose to walk through it. Love, Sophia." I held that invitation for 3 days, reading it over and over, weighing the cost of going against the cost of staying away. Finally, I called Marco. "Should I go?" I asked without preamble. "Do you want to?" "I want to support Sophia and Miles. I don't want to deal with Dad's performance of reconciliation or Mom's tears or Isabella's attempts at peacemaking." "Then go for Sophia and Miles. Set your boundaries and stick to them. You've gotten good at that." So I went. I showed up exactly on time, not early enough to help with setup, which would have meant more exposure to family dynamics, but not late enough to make an entrance. I brought an expensive gift, a designer diaper bag Sophia had mentioned wanting, and steeled myself for whatever came next. The shower was held at my parents' house, the same house where I'd grown up, where I'd survived countless family dinners and quiet humiliations. Walking through that door felt like stepping into a past life, like visiting a museum of my own suffering. Sophia greeted me at the door, genuinely delighted. "You came, I wasn't sure you would." "I'm here for you and Miles, and to meet my future niece or nephew." "It's a girl," she said, her hand resting on her barely visible baby bump. "We haven't told everyone yet, but I wanted you to know. You're one of the first." Something warm bloomed in my chest. "A girl, that's wonderful." Miles appeared, pulling me into a hug that felt stiff with uncertainty. "Hey Val, thanks for coming. I know it's probably weird being back here." "It's fine," I said, and meant it. The house had no power over me anymore. It was just a building, just a space I used to inhabit. The party was smaller than I'd expected, mostly Sophia's friends and a few family members. Marco was there with his girlfriend, a kindergarten teacher named Rachel who seemed delightfully unimpressed by Moretti family drama. Isabella arrived late, looking tired but determined, and gave me a tentative smile across the room. My mother hovered, uncertain how to approach me, settling for the occasional longing glance when she thought I wasn't looking. I felt sorry for her, in a distant way. She'd chosen comfort over courage, and now she was living with that choice. Giovanni was the last to arrive, making an entrance even at his own home. He stopped when he saw me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other across the living room. I saw him cataloging the changes, my confident posture, my expensive clothes chosen for myself rather than to please him, the way I didn't shrink under his gaze. "Valentina," he said finally, "I didn't think you'd come." "I'm here for Sophia and Miles," I replied evenly. "Not for you." He flinched, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a calm acknowledgement of truth. The shower proceeded with the usual games and gift opening, and I found myself genuinely enjoying parts of it. Sophia was radiant, Miles was nervously excited, and the talk of nursery themes and midnight feedings felt wonderfully normal. During the gift opening, when Sophia unwrapped my designer diaper bag, she actually teared up. "Val, this is too much. I can't accept this." "You can and you will," I said firmly. "Every new mother deserves to feel pampered, and you're going to be an amazing mom. Consider it an investment in the next generation of strong women." After the official festivities, as people mingled over cake and coffee, my father approached me again. This time, we were semi-alone by the windows overlooking the garden. "Your business is doing well," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Very well. I heard about the venture capital funding. $2 million is impressive for such a young company. They believe in the vision. I could have helped you secure triple that amount with one phone call," he said. And there it was, the old Giovanni, unable to see my success without positioning himself at the center of it. "I'm sure you could have," I agreed. "But then it wouldn't have been mine. The money I raised came from people who believed in me, not in your connections. That's worth more than any dollar amount." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the garden where I'd played as a child. "I never meant to drive you away," he said finally, his voice lower. "I thought I was preparing you, toughening you up for the real world." "You were wrong." "Apparently so. You seem to have done fine without my version of preparation. I turned to face him fully. Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing fine, despite you. I'm not succeeding to prove you wrong, or to show you what you lost. I'm building my life because that's what healthy people do. They grow, they evolve, they create, and sometimes that means leaving behind the people who can't grow with them. So, this is permanent, he said. This distance between us. That's up to you, I said. If you can accept me as I am, if you can celebrate my success without trying to claim credit for it, if you can treat me with basic respect and dignity, then maybe we can find a way forward. But I will never again make myself smaller to make you feel bigger. That door is permanently closed. Before he could respond, Sophia called everyone together for a final toast. We gathered in the living room, glasses raised, and she looked around at all of us with emotion shining in her eyes. Thank you all for being here, she said. Family is complicated, and ours is no exception. But at the end of the day, what matters is showing up for each other, especially for the next generation. This little girl is going to grow up knowing that strength comes in many forms, that success isn't one size fits all, and that it's okay to forge your own path. She looked directly at me when she said that last part, and I felt tears prick my eyes. To new beginnings, Sophia continued, and to the courage it takes to define family on your own terms. To new beginnings, we echoed, and I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe, eventually, this family could become something healthier. Not perfect, not unmarred by the past, but functional in a way it had never been before. I left before the lingering could get awkward, hugging Sophia and Miles, exchanging phone numbers with Isabella, who whispered, "Can we really do coffee soon?" and nodding acknowledgement to my parents. Marco walked me to my car. That went better than expected, he observed. Low bar, I said, but I was smiling. Sophia's going to be a good mother. That little girl is lucky. She'll have a badass aunt to look up to. If they want me in her life, I'll be there. On my terms, but I'll be there. Driving home through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, I felt lighter than I had in months. I'd walked back into the lion's den and emerged unscathed, not because the lions had changed, but because I had. I was no longer prey. Back at my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop to start working on the expansion plans. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for coming today." It meant a lot to Miles and me. "You're welcome in our home anytime, with or without the rest of the family. P.S. Your father looked shaken after your conversation. I think you might have actually gotten through to him, Sophia." I smiled and sent back, "Thank you for the invitation and the grace. Let's have lunch next week and talk about that rebranding project. Business and babies don't have to be mutually exclusive." Her response was immediate. "Deal. You're going to love working with me. I'm demanding." Good. I respect demanding clients. They know their worth. Over the next few months, my life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable rather than survivable. The venture capital funding allowed me to hire 2 more strategists and a full-time business development manager. We moved into an even larger space, keeping the Pearl District loft as our creative hub, but adding satellite offices in Seattle and San Francisco. The book deal came through, a contract with a major publisher for Authentic Empire, building success on your own terms. I spent late nights writing, channeling all my experiences into a guide for others trying to break free from limiting expectations. Isabella and I did start meeting for coffee, awkward at first, then increasingly honest. She told me about her own struggles with Dad's expectations, about feeling trapped in a career chosen more to please him than herself. I didn't push her to make any dramatic moves, just listened and shared my own story when asked. "I don't know if I can do what you did," she admitted one rainy afternoon. "Just walk away from everything." "You don't have to do it the way I did," I said. "There's no one right path, but you do have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice for peace." For me, sacrificing my authenticity was too high a price. Only you can decide what your boundaries are. Marco's practice thrived, focusing on representing the kind of entrepreneurs who reminded him of me, people with vision but without traditional backing, innovators challenging established systems. We collaborated on several projects, and slowly, we rebuilt a sibling relationship based on mutual respect rather than shared trauma. My mother and I maintained a polite distance. She called occasionally, always sounding nervous, always asking if I needed anything. I was cordial but careful, unwilling to let her guilt become my burden. She made her choices. I made mine. As for Giovanni, we existed in a state of cautious neutrality. We saw each other at family events I chose to attend, exchanged pleasantries, maintained civility. He never apologized, not directly, but his behavior shifted. He stopped making cutting remarks about my career, stopped trying to control family narratives, stopped expecting me to seek his approval. Whether this was genuine growth or strategic retreat, I didn't particularly care. The outcome was the same. I was free. Sophia became an unexpected friend and client. Her rebranding project was challenging and rewarding, helping her transition her family's traditional restaurant business into a modern hospitality group. She approached everything with fierce intelligence and surprising vulnerability, willing to question assumptions and embrace change. "You know what I love about working with you?" she said during one of our strategy sessions. "You never tell me what I should want. You help me figure out what I actually want and then show me how to build toward it." "That's because authenticity can't be prescribed," I said. "It has to be discovered. I'm just a guide on your journey, not the destination." When Sophia's daughter, Gianna Elena Moretti, was born on a snowy December evening, I was one of the first people Miles called. I went to the hospital the next morning, bearing flowers and a card with a quote I'd found. "May you always have the courage to be exactly who you are." Holding that tiny baby, looking at her perfect face unmarked by disappointment or compromise, I made a silent promise. This little girl would grow up knowing at least one woman in her family who chose herself, who proved that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment but self-preservation, who demonstrated that success without approval was possible. "She's beautiful," I told Sophia, who looked exhausted and radiant. "She's fierce," Sophia replied. "Came out screaming and hasn't stopped. She knows what she wants." "Good. The world needs more women who know what they want." My father visited later that day, and I was still there, sitting with Sophia while Miles ran home to shower. Giovanni held his granddaughter with surprising gentleness, his usually stern expression softening into something I'd rarely seen: vulnerability. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You're going to change everything, aren't you?" I watched him with that baby and felt something complicated stir in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. He was capable of tenderness. He'd just forgotten how to extend it to the people who needed it most. Maybe Gianna would remind him. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility to manage his emotional growth. When he finally noticed me in the corner, he didn't startle or make an excuse to leave. Instead, he carefully placed Gianna back in her bassinet and approached me. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for showing up for your brother and Sophia." "I'm here for them," I clarified, "but I appreciate the acknowledgement." He nodded slowly. "Your mother wants to have dinner, all of us together, to celebrate Gianna. Would you consider it?" I thought about it, really thought about it. A family dinner at the house where so many painful memories lived, a table where I'd been diminished so many times I'd lost count. But also, a chance to create a new memory, one where I showed up as the person I'd become rather than the person I'd been. "I'll come," I said. "But I'm setting some ground rules. No comments about my career unless they're genuinely congratulatory. No passive-aggressive remarks disguised as humor. No attempts to give me unsolicited advice or criticism. And if any of those boundaries are crossed, I will leave immediately without explanation or apology. Can you accept those terms?" Something flickered across his face. Maybe surprise. Maybe grudging respect. "Yes." "Then I'll be there." The dinner happened 2 weeks later, on a cold January evening. I arrived in my own car, maintaining my ability to leave on my terms, and walked through that familiar door once more. But this time was different. This time, when Giovanni raised his glass to toast his granddaughter and his family, his eyes met mine with something that might have been respect. This time, when the conversation turned to careers and accomplishments, Isabella mentioned my recent Forbes profile with pride rather than jealousy. This time, Marco told stories about our collaborative projects, positioning us as equals rather than competitors. And this time, when my mother served dessert, she placed it in front of me with a small, sad smile and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But when those patterns emerged, I calmly enforced my boundaries. When my father started to make a cutting remark about kids today and their startups, I simply looked at him until he changed direction mid-sentence. When Isabella began slipping into old people-pleasing behaviors, I gently redirected her back to her own opinions. I was teaching them how to interact with me, but more importantly, I was modeling for Isabella and Sophia how to exist with dignity in this family, how to be present without sacrificing yourself, how to love people while still maintaining your boundaries. As I drove home that night, past the houses lit with warm light and full of their own complicated family dynamics, I realized something profound. I'd won. Not because my family had changed, though some had. Not because my father had apologized, because he hadn't, not really. I'd won because I'd learned to win on my own terms, to define victory as maintaining my integrity rather than gaining their approval. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. An unknown number, which I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Valentina Moretti?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. Speaking. "My name is Jennifer Park, and I'm a producer for the podcast Reimagine. We focus on people who've made bold life changes to align with their values. We'd love to have you on the show to discuss your journey from family business to independent entrepreneur." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. "How did you hear about me?" "Your Forbes profile, the tech venture funding announcement, and honestly, word of mouth. You've become something of a legend in Portland's business community. The woman who walked away from the Moretti empire and built something better. I don't know about legend, I said, pulling into my parking spot. Trust me, Jennifer said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You're inspiring a lot of people to ask hard questions about the price they're paying for other people's approval. So, what do you say? Will you share your story? I looked up at my apartment, at the life I'd built from nothing but determination and truth. I thought about everyone who might be listening, who might be sitting in their own version of my father's dining room, swallowing their dignity along with dinner. Yes, I said, I'll do it. When do you want to record? Because that was the thing about walking away from toxicity and building something real. The story didn't end with your own liberation. It rippled outward, giving permission to others to consider their own cages, to examine their own compromises, to imagine their own versions of freedom. I was Valentina Moretti, and I'd survived the family that was supposed to define me by refusing to let them. I'd built an empire from nothing but self-belief and stubborn determination. And now, I was going to help others do the same. The scars of the Moretti dynasty would always be part of my story, but they were no longer the whole story. They were just the prologue to something bigger, bolder, and entirely my own. And that, I thought as I unlocked my door and stepped into my chosen life, was the sweetest victory of all.